started to vomit and cry from pain when his belly was touched. I gave him gabapentin, but it wasn't helping. It was late, so my mom and I took him while my boyfriend was at work. Without hesitation, my mom and I signed approval for CPR and life-saving procedures. The vet told us he had a urinary blockage from bladder crystals, so he got a urinary catheter and IV fluids. A couple of days later, I brought him back home. Yesterday, I noticed he was still straining to urinate and had urinary incontinence since I was noticing bloody urine in places it shouldn't be. Since it was still occurring for another 24 hours, I took him back to the emergency vet since it was a holiday. I had asked my boyfriend to come along for assistance since it was a joint decision for us to get the cat. His first words to me were, "It's best we euthanize him. It's for the best," to which I told him no. Kitties with feline lower urinary tract disease, FLUTD, are still able to make a full recovery and live a long, normal life given some diet and environmental changes. He argued, "It's chronic, it's lifelong. He's going to have to keep going to the vet, it's not worth it." I had already signed the kitty up for AKC pet insurance since they are the only ones who cover pre-existing conditions. I told him that I simply did not want to have the conversation. "I'm not changing my stance on this." I told him to have a heart. I do have a heart, and this is best for him. He's my baby boy, my child. He's not your fucking child. Stop treating him like that. Children are the future generation, cats aren't sentient. You are his owner, not his parent. I have raised all of my kitties since they were little. I treat them as though they were my own children. It's a chronic illness. Euthanasia is best. By that logic, I have chronic illnesses too. Does that mean I have to be put down? That's a false equivalency. I then told him to leave because I didn't want to have that conversation. "Well, we're going to have it." "No, we aren't. We can wait for the vet." They're going to say the same thing. Then we cross that bridge when we get to it, otherwise, shut up or leave. He was dead silent the entire drive and while we were there, the vet said nothing about putting my cat down. He didn't reblock, and we got some more meds for him. My boyfriend still refuses to change his stance on it. To note, this kitty is a little over a year old and otherwise healthy. I don't think it's right for my boyfriend to have a say in this, considering I've taken sole responsibility for all of the animals since he moved out. Am I wrong for refusing euthanasia, or is my boyfriend the a-hole? Edit for context. He originally wanted to take the kittens, we jointly adopted two, when he moved out. I told him no, as it would be too stressful and they were already bonded to my other kitty. I have 3 cats total, and dog, as well as a new environment. The real reason is because he essentially abandoned his other cat because she was too feral. I had gotten my first kitty all of his vaccines to make sure we could take her but not risk illness. She ended up pregnant and we took 2 of her babies. Edit. I'm fully aware of the possible recurring blockages. I already have family support to take care of vet bills and his new diet. I am also working to make the house less stressful and plan to talk with his primary vet about anti-anxiety meds like amitriptyline, I used to be on it myself, or Prazosin. Lil dude is barely a year old. I know he'll be just fine. The vet never once suggested euthanasia. That was all the boyfriend did. Relevant comments. OP further explains her first edit. We had split earlier this year but eventually reconciled, although he moved out of my house. He wanted to take the kittens. I explain in an edit on the post, but I kept them. Everything was good in the new relationship until this week. OP also clarifies she wanted emotional support, not his opinion or financial support. It was a joint decision to adopt the kitties. It was a joint decision for me to keep them. I shouldered the responsibility because I did not trust him considering he tried to get rid of the kitty, the one with FLUTD, before he moved out and he abandoned his last cat. Simply put, he does not have an opinion. Even if he miraculously decides to help financially, the animals live with me. I take care of them myself. I take them to the vet. I spend time with them. I had merely asked for his emotional support, not his opinion. Comment 1. Flood kitties can definitely live happy and long lives. He's probably the type to just get another cat. My Struvite cat became 17 and died of old age thyroid issues. OP. One of the reasons why I refused to let him take the kittens when he moved out, we jointly adopted 2, was because he basically abandoned his last cat. I purposefully got my first cat all of his feline leukemia vaccines so we could take her in. She ended up pregnant and we took 2 of her kittens. He would not bring his cat to live with us because she is too feral now. I told him that it would be too stressful for the kitties, which it would be since they were bonded to me and my other animals plus a new environment. But the main reason was because he abandoned his last cat and tried to get rid of my kitty that was just in the ER. I'm keeping the kitties with me 100%. Comment 2. Honey, this is advice from a middle-aged stranger on the internet, so take it for what it is worth. His problem-solving skills. Your boyfriend shows no willingness to have a meaningful discussion, to consider the inputs on potentially a complex situation, and is immediately going for the easiest and most cruel solution. He is showing zero interest and patience in waiting to hear from the professional, actually hearing what the professional says, discussing what would be involved in solving the problem, and, very importantly, taking your emotional well-being into consideration. This is a massive red flag. He and you have massive differences in how you perceive the value of life. The value of another creature and their feelings. Another massive red flag. I can tell you that of all my social group, when there is such a disparity, like with all morals between two people in a partnership, this has caused continuous pain throughout the years of their relationships. Continuous arguments over pets for decades. Considering how your boyfriend approaches problems, has he made the situation easier to deal with, or harder? Because life is a series of problems. They are constant. And if your boyfriend is making life's problems harder, not easier, and he is not willing to face that and work on it, picture the next year, 5 years, 10, 20, 40, with his problem-solving skills. Having kids, dealing with finances, moving, jobs, family problems, etc. I can't tell you to break up with him. That is something no internet stranger can tell you. We don't know you or your boyfriend. What I wish I'd been told when I was your age, though, is that these huge differences in your moral compasses, and his unwillingness to have the patience to work out problems in a patient, informed and caring manner, can make your life much, much, much more difficult than it has to be. I can tell you that if my husband ever abandoned a pet, or had it put down when the pet was so young and my hubby could not be bothered to even hear the vet's solution, and there was an absolute simple solution to prevent the problem, and that pet would have a normal long life, I would be getting a divorce. Comment 3. Euthanasia is 1,000,000% humane in a lot of cases, but the fact that the boyfriend here thinks cats aren't sentient is wild. Does he honestly think any high-functioning animal doesn't have thoughts or emotions? Comment 4. The largest majority of times people use sentient in a sentence they meant to use sapient, but their vocabulary is lacking. Editor's note. If you're not aware, the difference is sentience is about feeling. Sapience is about thinking and reasoning. Comment 5. Hi, Vet Tech here. We see a lot of blocked cats at my clinic. Male cats often reblock soon after their first blockage. It takes time for treatment and diet to take effect. My DVM would never recommend euthanasia because of a second blockage because it just happens a lot. Even if the cat were to continue to become blocked in the future, things like PU surgery are always an option. It's definitely not appropriate to jump straight to euthanasia. And frankly, any partner that is so quick to dismiss your feelings and push for something you love to quite literally be destroyed is giving off major red flags. Protect yourself. Protect your babies. Run, don't walk away from this dude. OP, I think PU surgery would be an option in the case he's blocked up again in the future, not during the first couple of weeks. Euthanasia was never brought up by the vet both times my kitty was at the emergency vet. I'm very concerned with his comments, especially if we were to have kids. What would he do then? And that's if I'm able to have children of my own. I liken raising my fur babies as training for when I do have kiddos. Don't even get me started on the BS he pulled when he left the first time. Update July 8th, 2024. Here's a little update for everyone. My little kitty is doing much better. He is back to his normal, happy self and is still just as annoyingly cuddly as before. He is currently on Hill's CD prescription diet mixed with plenty of water, and he seems to be just fine with it. We go back to the vet later this week to discuss some anti-anxiety medications and other treatments to help enrich and care for my kitty. He is back to hanging out with the other animals and relaxing. Thank you to everyone for the suggestions for different methods. I have made note of all of them to try them out. I have read every single comment on my last post, and while I may not agree with some of them, I do take them into account. To make the point clear, I am not against euthanasia. If my cat's quality of life starts to deteriorate or treatment is ineffective, then that will certainly be a conversation to be had. My primary issue with my now ex-boyfriend was about how young my cat is and how he is otherwise healthy. As for the now ex-boyfriend, I tried again to talk to him but to no avail. I attempted a couple of days ago to possibly find some common ground or even compromise, but nothing. He continued to refuse to admit his wrongs toward both me and the animals. He told me he would try to help with them financially, though he should have been doing that for the last year, not now when he realizes he is losing me. He resorted to stonewalling, telling me he couldn't do it anymore and how upset he was with me, outside of the gaslighting, calling me a liar, and saying how I was manipulative for taking my kitty to the vet. He dumped me, and now I am blocked. When I go back to the vet, I am going to work on getting his name taken off the microchips. I am not entirely sure if he will turn violent or not, but if he shows up at my door, he will be met with my AR-15. I am keeping the animals far away from him, and hopefully, he stays far away from me. There were plenty more issues with the ex, but those belong on a separate topic. It's all uphill from here. Thank you everyone for the kind words and suggestions. Relevant comments. One commenter mentioned that they hadn't seen the initial post but expressed relief that the cat is doing better and praised the decision to end the relationship with the boyfriend. They advised changing the locks and installing cameras for security. They also shared a personal experience about their own cat, who had bladder stones and required surgery. Although the surgery was expensive, they would do it again. They sent positive vibes and headbutts from their own cats. Another commenter was glad the cat was doing well and offered advice on updating microchip information. They explained that microchips are associated with an online account where the information is stored. If the company is unknown, the vet can help identify it by writing down the number. They noted that most vets can't change microchip info themselves as it has to be updated in a database. They also reminded the OP to inform their vet not to give any information to the ex or allow him to bring in the pets. A third commenter expressed happiness about the cat's recovery and suggested that separating from the ex might actually be a stress relief. They provided information on finding the microchip company through the AITA microchip database by entering the chip number. They also recommended ensuring the vet's file is noted to prevent the ex from accessing any pet information. A fourth commenter humorously pointed out that pets can often reveal the true nature of people, implying that the cat's health scare helped expose the boyfriend's true colors. They shared a personal anecdote about their dog, who had peed in a girl's car, which led to the girl calling the cops, as an indicator of someone's character. OP's response. The OP appreciated the support and mentioned that their dog is usually a good judge of character, recalling an incident where the dog peed in a girl's car, and it turned out she called the cops for no reason. They acknowledged that sometimes mistakes are made but appreciated the advice and kind words from the commenters. Top comments. One commenter pointed out that, even worse, it sounds like he had animals of his own, and was being shitty to them. Honestly, she should have dumped him when he abandoned his cat. Like seriously, even if you're not an animal lover, ditching what should be a major commitment should be a huge red flag. In response, another commenter stated that, he's the kind of person that thinks animals are objects and property. So if they break, just get a new one. Which is dangerous, especially since he's a dense and stubborn child. Another reply elaborated on the issue, expressing concern that, seriously, the commenter saying he meant sapience and not sentience got to me since cats clearly think and reason. Most animals, including guinea pigs and even bees, do too. Not all to the same level as humans, obviously, and even sentience should be enough to make him give a shit, but humans are animals too. We're not as different, nor as vastly superior, as so many people think. A further reply agreed, noting that cats and many other animals, such as guinea pigs and even bees, clearly think and reason. They emphasized that even sentience should be enough to care for animals and pointed out that humans are not vastly superior to other animals as some people believe. They also mentioned their experience in veterinary medicine, where they observed similar attitudes of control over animals and children, finding it disheartening. One more commenter shared a personal story, revealing that their father had a similar mindset. The father was insistent on the commenter playing certain sports and following his career path, and did not allow the commenter to forget it until they left home. The commenter also described a situation where their father wanted a Malamute for the family despite their grandfather's fear of dogs. The father's solution was to dump the dog in the backyard, but the commenter pushed back until the father lost enthusiasm. Overall, these comments reflect concerns about the boyfriend's attitude towards animals and the potential implications for his behavior in other aspects of life. They highlight the importance of viewing animals as sentient beings deserving of care and respect. Narcissistic mom abandoned me as a teen for her boyfriend, who later left her. Now she's lonely and angry I'm keeping her away. I am a 25-year-old woman who has not had any contact with my mother for the past 5 years, because she threw me out when I was 20 to make room for her new boyfriend. Her ex-boyfriend at the time, whom we will call Rick, was a blatant gold digger who did not even try to hide his intentions. My mother had been dating Rick for about 3 months before she decided to bring him home. Foolishly, she didn't even inform him that she had a daughter until after he was already there. My mom, who is now 50, was almost 45 at the time, but she lied to everyone, claiming she was not a day older than 40. She managed to maintain this deception with the help of fillers and Botox. As for Rick's age, I am not entirely sure, but he must have been in his early to mid-30s, certainly not older than that. He was reasonably attractive, and considering my mother is also quite attractive for her age, I initially thought they made a good couple. However, my opinion quickly changed when Rick started boasting about how wonderful it was that my mother had a substantial amount of her own money. He claimed to admire her for being a strong, independent, wealthy woman, which he said was the reason he wanted to be with her. Although those were his words, I am convinced that it was actually our enormous house, the spacious living room, and the obviously expensive decor that truly drew him to my mother. It was widely known that my mother's wealth was solely due to the substantial inheritance she received from her parents. She was an heiress, and that essentially defined her existence. She never had a career of her own, so while it was true she was wealthy, I found it hard to see her as strong or independent. She never had to lift a finger for anything in her life. Her parents had built a successful company from the ground up, and upon their passing, the company was handed over to her uncle, who has been managing it ever since. My mother had no involvement in the business operations and showed no interest in learning about it. As long as she received the money she was entitled to, she didn't concern herself with anything else. My mother indulged in various hobbies, but she never pursued any with the dedication or focus needed to turn them into a genuine career. This attitude extended to motherhood as well. I am fairly certain that I was simply a hobby for her because she was bored. I am certain that if she hadn't been bored, she would have terminated the pregnancy, and I wouldn't be here. In a strange way, I am fortunate that my mother is so fickle and indecisive because it led to my birth. Additionally, I am lucky that my grandparents were good-hearted people who stepped in to raise me in her absence. My mom likely lost interest in being pregnant midway and decided she wasn't cut out for motherhood. After I was born, she frequently left me with my grandparents while she spent most of her time partying or socializing with her friends. It's no exaggeration to say that as a child I genuinely believed my grandparents were my parents. I have no idea who my father is because my mother conceived me after a one-night stand and had no means of contacting him, so she simply didn't. Fortunately, my grandparents were affectionate and nurturing individuals who never made me feel the void left by my absent parents. I never knew my father, and my mother never allowed me to build a relationship with her, so my grandparents were essentially my only family. For a time I was content with this arrangement. However, my grandmother passed away during my junior year, and a couple of years later, my grandfather also passed. This left me devastated, as I felt I had lost the only people who genuinely cared about me. Thankfully, I still had my uncle, who stepped in to support me. Although my uncle and I were never as close as I had been with my grandparents and didn't communicate often, he assured me he would be there for me, and he truly lived up to that promise. I had never permanently resided with my grandparents. I always lived with my mother but visited them every weekend. My mother was rarely home during the day, so I was accustomed to being alone after school, which allowed me ample time to complete my homework and enjoy my activities around the house. After my grandparents passed away, I went off to college but made a point to return home at least one weekend each month and during the holidays. This wasn't out of a desire to maintain contact with my mother but rather to seek the comfort of my childhood home. When I returned, my mother's presence was something I had to accept. Throughout my life, Mom stayed the same, a shallow, self-centered narcissist with no regard for the world. Her actions seemed predictable to me. She had many boyfriends, but none of them lasted. Some lovers were concerned about her lively social life, which included many male acquaintances, while others were simply victims of her boredom and were dumped with no regard for their feelings. I had encountered many of my mother's boyfriends, and each breakup was marked by loud arguments and shouting that I could clearly hear from my room, which was directly above the living room. My mother never seemed to make an effort to keep any of them around, likely because she didn't care enough about them. However, when she began dating Rick, it was the first time I couldn't predict what would happen. Everything changed with him, and it was surprising that my mother didn't realize he was a gold digger, especially since she usually spotted such things easily. I previously mentioned that my mother brought Rick home for the first time after 3 months of dating, coincidentally on a weekend when I was there. When I politely greeted him, Rick looked confused because he hadn't expected my presence. It was only then that my mother informed him she had a daughter, which visibly unsettled him for a brief moment before he regained his usual charming demeanor. Despite his charm, I could immediately see through Rick and knew he wasn't genuinely interested in my mother. Throughout dinner, his primary focus was on how fortunate he was to have found such a wealthy and independent woman. He couldn't stop praising her beauty and independence, emphasizing how impressed he was to have won her over. It was clear he was trying to flatter her, and unfortunately, it was working. Rick was particularly interested in my mother's riches, which appeared to impress him the most. It was brutally clear that his primary interest was her money. After supper, my mother told me that she had invited Rick to stay with us for a few weeks since he had recently lost his job and needed a place to stay before his landlord evicted him. Suddenly, his excessive flattery made sense. He needed a place to stay, and my mother was his ticket to free lodging. I wanted to warn my mom, but I usually refrained from commenting on her relationships, because I believed she knew what she was doing. Additionally, we didn't have the kind of relationship where I felt comfortable discussing such matters with her. I chose not to say anything because I wanted to give Rick the benefit of the doubt, unaware that this decision would ultimately backfire. A few weeks went by, and I didn't return home until the following month. Since my mother and I didn't stay in touch while I was at college, I had no idea how things were progressing between her and Rick. When I finally came back home, I discovered that Rick had essentially taken over my mother's house, transforming it into a complete bachelor pad. Surprisingly, my mother didn't seem to mind at all. The place was a mess, but she assured me that the housekeeper would have everything cleaned up by the next morning. While this was true, it was still unexpected, given that my mother had always been a bit of a neat freak. Once again, I felt it wasn't my place to comment on the situation. Throughout the weekend, Rick and I didn't interact at all, and I hardly left my room. Just like every other weekend before that, I only stayed for 2 days and had no intention of engaging with anyone. I kept to myself, staying out of everyone's way and focusing on my own business. The only times I went downstairs were for meals, and even then, I would just take my food back to my room to eat alone. To clarify, I had not spoken to Rick at all throughout the weekend, yet he still had an issue with my presence and disliked that I had come home. On the day I was supposed to leave, my mother came into my room and said she needed to discuss something important with me. This was unusual since we typically had nothing to talk about, so I anticipated bad news, which it indeed was. She explained that she would prefer if I didn't come back home after that month because Rick felt uncomfortable having me around. He claimed he wanted it to be just the two of them and that my presence over the weekend had completely ruined the vibe. Apparently, he thought he and my mother had a good rhythm going, which I had disrupted by coming home in the middle of the month. He felt suffocated by the family atmosphere and wasn't ready for that kind of environment yet. It was obvious to me that Rick was bluffing. He wanted me out of the picture and was using flimsy excuses to achieve that. It was highly insulting because this was my home first, and he was the one disrupting the vibe by being there and making a mess. I decided to ask my mom when Rick was planning to leave since he wasn't supposed to stay there permanently. She had initially said he would stay for just a couple of weeks until he found a new job and got back on his feet. Unfortunately, that question set my mom off, and she snapped that it was none of my business. She emphasized that it was her house, and as an adult, I needed to clear out and stay away. She was serious about this guy, and whatever he wanted would go. If he wanted me gone, she would ensure that happened. Realizing it was pointless to argue, I told my mom that Rick was just a gold digger, and she would regret kicking me out for him. She didn't seem to care, and neither did I, so I packed my things and left that very day. For the following couple of months until Christmas, I stayed away from what was clearly no longer my home. However, when Christmas came and the winter break started, the campus dorms closed, and I needed a place to stay. I decided to reach out to my uncle. Although we had kept in touch, we were not particularly close, making it awkward to ask him for help. Nonetheless, I had no other option. My grandparents had set aside a college fund for me, so my education was covered, but they hadn't anticipated this situation. When I called my uncle, he kindly offered to let me stay with him and his family for a while. I was deeply grateful and always will be for him opening his home and making me feel like part of the family. During this time, we connected, and he explained why he had never tried to build a closer relationship with me. Growing up, he and my mother had a strained relationship, and he felt that trying to bring me into his family might offend her or cause drama, which he wanted to avoid. As long as I was being looked after, he preferred to stay on the sidelines. However, once his sister kicked me out, he had no choice but to step in because he couldn't let me be homeless. We had an honest heart-to-heart conversation, and from that moment on, he became my primary family. His wife, who was the kindest woman I've known since my grandmother, and his kids, who were like the brothers I never had, welcomed me warmly. Following that particular Christmas, I began spending a lot of time with my uncle's family, essentially becoming a part of it. After graduating from college, I needed somewhere to live temporarily until I secured a job and could support myself. It was during this period that I learned my mother and Rick had broken up shortly after she kicked me out. Although I didn't know the specific details, most people said it was because Rick had been unfaithful, cheating on her with another woman. The irony was clear. She had kicked me out to pursue a different lifestyle with Rick, but it all turned out to be for nothing. Despite this, My mother, being the self-centered narcissist that she is, did not reach out to apologize after their breakup. I was relieved that she didn't because I had nothing to say to her. Our relationship was over. From that point onward, my uncle and his family became my only family. I never relied on my mother when my grandparents were around, and with my uncle's support now, I still don't need her. It's been years since I've had any contact with her, and a lot has changed in my life. I am now married and have a child of my own. 2 years ago, I met my husband John at a job I took after graduating. It was meant to be a short-term position, and I never expected that John and I would end up together. However, here we are, 2 years later, with our daughter. She was born just 3 months ago, and I already love her more than anyone else. She brings immense joy to our lives and makes everything better. In my excitement, I made the mistake of sharing our news on social media. Throughout my pregnancy, I kept it quiet, and only John, my uncle, and a few close friends knew about it. I've never been very active on social media because I strongly believe in the evil eye. However, after my daughter's birth, I couldn't resist announcing it to the world. Posting about my daughter's birth on social media turned out to be a mistake, because it led to my mother discovering that I was pregnant and had given birth. After 5 years of no contact, she finally reached out to me. This happened last week, and I had mixed feelings about it. She sent me an email, mentioning that some of my family members had informed her about the baby. She expressed a desperate desire to meet her granddaughter. The email was quite lengthy, and my first action was to check if she had included an apology. Unfortunately, there was none. True to her character, she focused on how difficult her life had been since her breakup with Rick, and how she still had trust issues from that toxic relationship. She elaborated on how lonely she had become, pointing out that all her former friends now had families of their own, or were occupied with hobbies and work, unlike her. She lamented that she was constantly lonely because she had no family to talk to since I left, and her friends were always too busy for her. Now, she wanted to mend our relationship and reconnect with me. She admitted to being tired of spending every day alone and acknowledged that she was getting older and couldn't handle the solitude anymore. She implored me to accept her back into the family. While the email was indeed sad, it did nothing to soften my resolve. I had decided a long time ago, essentially from the day she chose her boyfriend over me, that she was not going to be my mother. Sure, it was distressing to know that she was now sad and lonely, but I didn't feel obligated to make her feel like part of a family again. She had 25 years to make me feel like I was part of her family and genuinely her daughter, but she never did. She was always too engrossed in her own life, and now I am engrossed in mine. She never treated me like her daughter, so I don't feel compelled to treat her like my mother. It's as simple as that. The email was also infuriating. She never once thought it necessary to apologize for what she did. It was absurd that she wrote an entire page about her suffering without considering how difficult it must have been for me to grow up with a mother who didn't care about me. Yes, I was fortunate to have grandparents who loved me and an uncle who looked out for me, but that doesn't replace a mother's love. For years as a child, I wondered why I wasn't good enough for my mom and tried everything to win her over. It wasn't until middle school that I realized it wasn't my fault, it was hers. But those years are gone, and I will never stop wondering why she even had me if she wasn't interested in being a mother. There was no apology for any of that, and I might have been able to overlook it, but she didn't even consider it necessary to apologize for kicking me out of her house 5 years ago. She knew how challenging it would be for me since I wasn't close to my uncle at that time, and my grandparents were no longer around, yet she seemed indifferent to all of it. Her only concern was her own happiness and Rick's. After reading that email, all the anger and frustration I had been allowing to build up inside of me just bubbled up to the surface. Instead of just ignoring the email, I decided to respond to it. Let me just tell you guys, it was not a nice email that I wrote out to her. I called her all sorts of derogatory names and said that she was not even fit to be a part of society, let alone be a mother. I expressed that I would have preferred being an orphan over being born to someone like her who had no respect for herself or anyone else. I told her she deserved Rick because he was just as shallow, stupid, and selfish as she was. It was unfortunate that the two narcissists didn't stay together because they truly deserved each other. I made it clear that I would never allow her to meet my family because, despite our blood relation, I wanted nothing to do with her and intended to keep it that way. I sent a very angry email without bothering to hold back. Of course, my mom was pretty shocked and upset because of it. Within a few hours of that email, I heard back from her, and she said exactly what I had thought just a few minutes after sending that email. She said that if I was that mad at her, then I shouldn't have responded to her email at all instead of saying those horrible things to her. She told me that she knew she had made a lot of mistakes as a mother, but this was her trying to make the situation better between us by reaching out to me after so many years and trying to be a part of her granddaughter's life. But if I didn't want that, I could have just said so instead of taking things so far and saying such horrible things to her. Honestly, I feel like a kind of jerk because of the things that I said. It wasn't even as though I had used nice language in that email either. It had been a really nasty, curse-filled email, and I really regret sending it. I could tell from her response that she was very upset and angry, and I feel kind of bad because I know for a fact that she is really old and lonely now, and that email couldn't have been easy to receive. I feel like I owe her an apology, but at the same time, I don't want her to get the wrong idea. So, am I the asshole for sending my estranged mother a rude email after she reached out to me after my daughter was born but didn't apologize? Update 1. Hey everyone, thank you so much for all the love and support you have shown us. My daughter is doing great, and we really appreciate your concern. John and I talked extensively about the email from my mother, and we concluded that I do not owe her an apology. Maybe my response was a bit harsh, but it was not wrong. She had always treated me like a stranger, and now, in her old age and loneliness, she wants to play happy family because she has no one else. That's not fair, and what's worse is that she didn't even think she needed to apologize to me first for what she did. So now, she can complain all she wants, but it won't change the fact that she was a terrible mother, and I'm glad she's out of my life. I don't see myself ever wanting to reconnect with her because, even when I lived with her, it felt like living with a stranger. I never saw her as my mother, so introducing her to my daughter and calling her grandma would be incredibly strange. That title is reserved for family, and she has never been family to me. I also discussed this with my uncle and aunt, and they agree with my stance. They told me I have no reason to feel guilty because my mother brought this on herself. She's been disconnected from her family her entire life, not just from me but also from my uncle. He believes it's only fair. I might have gone a bit overboard with the email, but she shouldn't have expected anything else after reaching out to me 5 years after kicking me out and then demanding to see my daughter. She didn't even bother to apologize, which is something I will never forget or forgive. Regardless, I'm willing to let the whole episode go and move on because I'm not interested in her drama. Right now, the only person who truly needs me is my daughter. I can't be there for her if I'm entangled in arguments with my mother or trying to prove her wrong. It's pointless, so she can keep sending nasty emails. They're all going to spam, and I won't even read them. Update 2. So I don't know why, but my mother thought that it would be appropriate to pay me a visit just 2 weeks after I told her that I was not interested in making things right with her. I was at home today because I'm on maternity leave right now, and John was out for work, so I didn't think much before opening the door when the bell rang. Unfortunately, I didn't check who it was outside because it was around the time that John usually comes home from work, so I just assumed it must be him. However, it wasn't him. It was my mom. I'm betting she must have asked some ignorant relative of mine for my address, and they, like morons, gave it to her without considering the repercussions. But as soon as I saw it was my mother, I summoned all of my resolve and closed the door. She was taken aback because she had clearly expected me to let her in because it was impolite to kick someone out after you had already opened the door. I was not concerned about being civil or polite. My primary goal was to get her away from me, and I was determined to do whatever was necessary to achieve that. After locking the door, she began screaming at me from the other side and became completely hysterical. I was on the verge of calling the police when she decided to throw a rock through my glass window. She did this and then quickly fled. Fortunately, my daughter was safe in her nursery, and I was the only person near the door, so I wasn't hurt either. The only thing damaged was my window. I immediately called the police and pressed charges against her. Now, I am just waiting for this situation to be resolved. She was extremely unhappy and kept yelling about how unfair and ungrateful I was. But honestly, I was just relieved that neither John nor my daughter was harmed. This incident was serious, and someone could have been seriously injured if they had been home. As a result, John and I have decided to file for a restraining order against her, and we need to act quickly. We have also informed my uncle about the situation so he can take the necessary precautions and increase security around his house. Update 3. Hello everyone. My mother was sentenced to 6 months of community service and fined a significant amount for her actions. She was also ordered to pay for the damages, and we were able to collect a substantial sum from her. To be honest, I believe the only reason she avoided imprisonment is due to her strong connections and having a very skilled lawyer. However, that's not our concern. We received the money and the restraining order, so we have nothing to worry about for now. John and I had been thinking about moving to a larger house, and we believe now is the right time to do it. It will be just me and my family. Wish us luck, you guys. Am I the asshole for not allowing my mother to bring her boyfriend I don't know or want to know to my wedding? I, 33, am not close with my mother, 55F, at all. She divorced my dad, 60, when I was 7 and almost immediately married my stepfather, Mark, whom despite everything, I was close with. They remained married until I was 16. I was upset when she divorced him and went to live with my dad and stepmom. In my adult life, I've chosen to remain close to my stepdad and even attended his wedding to his current wife, who is a very nice woman. My dad and my stepmom are great people. Since her divorce to my stepdad, my mom has been in and out of relationships, each time claiming this guy is the love of her life until they do something she doesn't like and they aren't the love of her life anymore. Both divorces with my dad and my stepdad were for very petty reasons. Dad, I think because he wouldn't allow her to get a new car because the budget was tight. I think the one that lasted the longest was 6 years and I think it's the current guy she's with, according to my sister. After I left home, she never did anything with me without her boyfriends. When I was 25, she broke up with her boyfriend and tried to cry to me about it. After working with my therapist, I set the boundary with my mother that if she wasn't willing to do anything with me without her boyfriend to not bother and I didn't want to talk about her love life. She was very hurt and we fell out for a while but she came back around a year later and has respected my rules since, but we only get together about 3 or 4 times per year. I understand that my mom's relationships and love life are important to her so I respect that we don't get together often. Fast forward to this year, I'm getting married to my partner, 35M, of a decade in October. It's a small intimate backyard wedding and reception, BBQ. We live in a rural area and our backyard wedding will have roughly 40 people. My dad, stepmom, stepdad and his new wife have all been invited. My mom asked if she could bring her boyfriend. I said no because I don't know him. My mom asked if she could bring him to meet me so I could meet him before the wedding. I said no and that I still had no interest in meeting her boyfriends. She said she understood but she felt it was unfair that I wasn't allowing her a +1 to my wedding when my dad and my stepdad were allowed to bring their spouses. I told her that the difference was that I knew their spouses. She wanted to know why I was so adamant about refusing to get to know her boyfriend. I explained to her that I saw no need since she'd just break up with them and move on to someone else eventually as she has always done before. She started to cry and told me I was being unreasonable and treating her as if she's a witch ****. Both my fiancé and my sister feel like I should suck it up for one day and let her bring her boyfriend so she can be comfortable there. I'm seriously considering it but I wanted to know if I'm TA here for sticking to my boundary at my wedding and what your thoughts are. Update. After reading everything here, I've decided to email my mother and invite him. I was already leaning towards telling her that he can come when I post it. I decided to set some ground rules for my mother. He is there as a +1 to my mother only. I made it clear to her that he is not my family and he is not my stepfather, so I will appreciate her not telling other people at the wedding he is my stepfather. Mark is my stepfather and he will be there. He is not to be in any family photos. In fairness, my stepdad Mark won't be in any family photos either, only my mom, dad, stepmom, and my siblings. He is not to approach me at any point during the wedding and reception. This does not change my previous boundaries. I'm only allowing him to come for her own comfort and to create a sense of fairness. I respect the fact she is in a relationship but that her love life has nothing to do with me and I wish to keep it that way. I told my mother that these are my terms for him being at my wedding and my terms are final and that I hope she can respect the fact that I'm trying to be reasonable. I used this opportunity to remind her of the reasons I put the boundary up in the first place. These reasons included forcing me to do activities with her shorter-term boyfriends in the past, forcing me to only discuss her love life while showing no interest in my life, and putting her relationships above her own children. If she responds, I'll let everyone know. Update 2. My mom called me within 10 minutes of getting the email. She thanked me for allowing him to come and said they would abide by my terms. She said she felt really hurt that her actions during her midlife crisis are why I'm refusing to meet her current boyfriend, who she says she's been with for 7.5 years, and that she thought things would eventually calm down enough where I would be comfortable meeting him. She said she now realizes that it will never happen. I told her that I'm firm on my stance. I think she started to cry but she said she understood and only wants him there because being around my dad and stepdad and their new wives, my dad has been married for 23 years and my stepdad for 12, makes her anxious and he helps keep her calm. She said she respects my stance and said it's her own fault I feel this way. I felt this may be the start of a guilt trip so I politely ended the call. Verdict, not the asshole. Additional comments to the post from OP. Update. I will update here since Mods told me I was maxed on my post. I want to thank everyone here for commenting and giving their opinions. Without context, I think it's a little hard to understand why I'm the way I am towards my mother. This past has given me a chance to reflect on my own behavior towards my mother. The truth of it is, I find dealing with her to be exhausting and I want to explain to everyone why. My mom is a gold digger. And that isn't my dad or stepdad talking shit about my mom. They're classy guys and would never do that. This is my own conclusion. My mom said regarding both divorces, I'd still be married if dad or stepdad just gave me what I wanted. She's also tried to start fights with my stepmom because she realizes my brother and I prefer her over our actual mom. It's true, I'm closer with my stepmom. I go to her for all the mom things because she listens and cares. My stepmom doesn't make everything about her. I believe my mom suffers from main character syndrome and expects to be the center of attention at every event, and if she isn't, she gets drunk, which leads me to my next point. My mom is an alcoholic. She was in a DUI 8 years ago and crashed into another car. Thank goodness no one was hurt. She doesn't drive anymore, lives in the city an hour away, and uses public transportation. But she still drinks a lot. At her height, she drank roughly 3 bottles of wine per day. I don't really know or care if it's more or less now. One of the other boundaries I set is I won't be around her if she's been drinking because that just stresses me out more. I'll be honest, I'm anticipating she's going to cause a drunken scene at my wedding. She slept with my brother's best friend 8 years ago when they were 21. This was a boy who my brother had known since preschool, and this ruined the friendship. 8 years on, and my brother will never forgive her for it. My mom thinks my brother needs to get over himself and that she did nothing wrong. Technically speaking, she didn't do anything illegal and everyone was a consenting adult, but it still felt so wrong that she slept with someone my brother was so close with. It's why I don't really want my partner around her. She dates younger guys. This current boyfriend is 10 years younger than her, which is a little better. I don't judge her for dating younger guys, that's okay. It's not okay to sleep with someone you watched grow up. This whole post helped me see just how exhausted I am by her. I realized I don't want to deal with her BS anymore. I also agree that I have maybe at times shown it by being TA and being unfair and unreasonable towards her. I just don't like myself when dealing with her. It puts me in a bad mood. However, the idea of having her more in my life makes me nauseous, but I want to keep the peace with the larger family, grandparents, aunt, uncle, etc. I've decided to take a page from my youngest brother's book and keep contact with just family functions. He's cordial to her at family events and keeps the peace when he's around her, but he keeps his distance and won't see her outside of a family event. So I'm going to do the same. I realized she could get sober, go to therapy, and change her entire life around, but I'm still going to see the woman who drinks all the time, sleeps with my brother's friend, and just treats people like garbage. It's not fair to anyone. Not me for having dealt with her, and not her if she ever did or was actively working hard to change her life. I do want to make sure she's taken care of, fine and healthy, but I also want to not be emotionally involved anymore. Figuring that out is above Reddit's pay grade. Relevant comments from OOP, resident_test_2107. Honestly, I think you need to distinguish the hurt you felt as a kid when she broke up with your 2 father figures from what would happen now if they broke up. You're an adult, not a kid. Her breakups are her business and don't impact you directly. Expecting someone to come to a wedding with her 2 exes there with their new wives is a lot. Expecting her to suck it up to put you first feels like you're trying to play out some drama and feelings you have left over from feeling hurt and abandoned as a kid by her breaking up your home. Divorce happens. It sucks for the kids, but so does an unhappy marriage. Feels like time to go back to therapy. OP, in my early 20s, she used to call me whenever she had a breakup and expected my sister and me to be emotionally supportive. She wouldn't spend time with me without her BFS around. She was insisting I meet some guy, who typically is a lot younger than her, like late 20s, or early 30s, which is good on her but still weird for me. She was dating for a few weeks. They'd break up after a year and she'd immediately find someone new. Wash, rinse, repeat. This was the pattern from when I was 19, 25. I always had to spend time with both of them. All she would talk about is her relationship. She would never ask me about school, my job, or my relationship. She's only met my partner twice. There's a lot more I can add about how my mom constantly prioritized her relationships over being a parent, but they aren't pertinent to this story. She got with a really toxic guy when I was 24 who stole a bunch of money from her. We all warned her he was a scumbag, but she didn't listen. After that, I told her I wanted nothing to do with her boyfriends going forward. She got really mad, saying I was disrespectful and that any child should want to see her mother happy. But I just got tired of dealing with her relationship drama and I don't ever want to deal with it again. I'm sure the guy she's with is nice since he's been around this long, but I'm just done. I don't want to be around my mother, but I want to be around family. August 28th, 2023. I've decided to estrange myself from my mother. We haven't gotten along since I was 16, and the last several years have been really bad. We only get together about 2-4 times per year, and it always ends with us fighting. I'm tired of it. I'll be honest. I've considered cutting contact with her, but the one thing that's preventing me from fully severing ties is her parents, my grandparents. I love them very much, and they are still hurting from my brother choosing to sever ties with her and keeping in low contact with that side of the family. My brother had valid reasons for doing this to her, and he will get together with my grandparents if my mother isn't there, but it's hard because they want to see him at the holidays and during special moments. I'm getting married in Oct, and this will be the first event where my mom and brother are in the same area. I've told both of them to stay away from each other, but I'm anticipating there will be drama because my mom doesn't like to hear she can't do something. I want to make it so we can see each other and be cordial at family events but not hang out otherwise. My youngest brother does something similar. I don't want to write her a letter because I fear that will cause more drama, but I expect she'll eventually call and want to do something with me, but I want to say no unless it's at a larger family function. How should I do this? My mother thinks she's entitled to alcohol at my wedding, September 23, 2023. My fiancé, 35M, and I, 33NB, are getting married in 2 weeks in our backyard. We will be having a catering spread for our reception afterwards. We decided to have a dry wedding for 2 reasons. My mom is an alcoholic who is known for making a scene when she gets drunk, and my fiancé has a brother who binge drinks and has had alcohol poisoning on more than one occasion. He doesn't drink all the time, but if he starts he can't stop until he either passes out or someone physically restrains him from getting more. I also have an uncle, mom's brother, and a stepdad who are in recovery and don't need the temptation. Neither fiancé and I are big drinkers, so we decided to just avoid any problems and just have a dry wedding. We will have a less dry reception party, honeymoon with some of our friends later on. All of our families have been supportive. My uncle was especially grateful to us for doing this since he takes his recovery very seriously and has been 7 years sober. I sent out wedding invitations 4 months ago and said it would be a dry wedding and asked people not to bring alcohol. Now today I get this call from my mom, who I also sent an invitation to 4 months ago. Mom, is it true you're not having alcohol at your wedding? Me, yes. Fiancé and I decided we didn't want alcohol during our special time. Mom, that's so silly. It's going to make your wedding boring. Me, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but and I have made our decision. We want everyone to feel comfortable at our wedding. Mom, clearly you don't care about my comfort. What if I want to have a little drink to pass the time? Me, like you did at a different uncle's wedding where you got so drunk and made a horrible scene calling uncle's wife a gold digger. Mom, it wasn't my fault. They made the drinks there too strong. Me, right. I really wish you would address this need to have alcohol wherever you go. Mom, I don't need to have alcohol. I just think your wedding will be boring without it. You want to have a fun wedding, don't you? Me, it will be a fun wedding. We don't need alcohol to have fun. Mom, this is so stupid. Why should everyone else be punished just to make it comfortable for a few people? It seems like you care more about uncle and stepdad than anyone else. Me, or maybe I just want to avoid any scenes. Mom, I just told you that wasn't my fault. Me, just like your DUI isn't your fault. Mom, how dare you bring up that difficult time in my life? I was going through a lot emotionally. What the hell is wrong with you kids? You need to mind your own business. If I want to drink, that's my business. Me, well, my wedding is my business. We do not want alcohol there. That's final. I can't stop you if you decide to pregame my wedding, but I've already made it clear to uncles and brothers that if you cause a scene that you are to be made to leave. Mom starts crying. Why do you kids hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve to be treated like this by my children? Me, are you really ready for me to go down that list? Mom, none of you understand. None of you will ever understand. I'm the mother of the bride. I should be treated better than this. Me, I think I've treated you pretty well during this process. I've acquiesced to your boyfriend, whom I don't even know, coming to my wedding. I've even given in to some of your other demands. So please tell me how you've been mistreated. Mom, you didn't invite me to go dress shopping. The mother of the bride always goes dress shopping with her daughter. I barely know because you never bring him around me. How do I know that you're marrying the right person? Me, that's because Aunt made my dress. Mom, sarcastically. Well, isn't that just special? Me, sighing. As for the rest, I think you know why. We aren't really close enough for you to have any say in who my significant other is. Honestly, Mom, I'm done with this conversation. If you really feel that strongly about this, I'll understand if you don't want to attend my wedding. Mom. Oh, I bet you'd like that, wouldn't you? One way or another you will respect me as your mother. Me. Sure, Mom. I'm hanging up now. Bye. Guys, I'm so livid right now. I have half a mind to uninvite her. I spoke to my dad and her brother. My uncle thinks her drinking is getting really bad again and has been wanting to hold an intervention. I told him I'm focused on the wedding right now, but that I definitely agree this was out of line and something needs to be done. What should I do? I don't want her ruining my wedding, but I'm so tired of dealing with this. Sorry, this is probably above Reddit's pay grade, but I just needed to vent. Update, I sent a text reiterating the rules. She said she knows where she isn't welcome and said she won't attend. My dad told me not to worry about this anymore and that he'll see to it that she doesn't ruin my wedding. Update 2. I sent this text to my mom. Mother, at this point I'm going to officially uninvite you from my wedding. I'm not going to allow you to change your mind, and I'd prefer it if you do not come to my wedding at all given your poor behavior. At this point, I've decided I don't want any further contact with you unless you decide to curb your toxic behaviors and drinking. I wish you the best. I hope you can find a way to heal, but I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry if this hurts you, but I can't handle you in my life anymore. If you try to force the issue, I'll be forced to take legal action up to and including contacting law enforcement. Please don't contact me again. I went to delete her from my Facebook page only to find a post that she had just written saying how being a mother is a thankless job and how she doesn't understand how she raised rude and judgmental kids. She ended it by saying she hopes her kids get over themselves someday. I'm done. This sucks, but it's been a long time coming. My head hurts. Small update. September 24th, 2023. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for their support. You have no idea how much your love and constructive comments mean to me. I'm glad I'm not alone. It's not a huge update, but I guess my grandparents and uncles have had enough. They've decided to stage an intervention next weekend. If she refuses to get help, she will no longer be welcomed at family events and she will no longer be part of the family. They told me not to worry about it. My sister will go as she's the only one of her children that even has a real relationship with her, but even my sister said that if she doesn't get help, she will cut her off too. I'm hoping and praying this works, but given that she spent 1 year in rehab and the second she was off probation chose to drink again doesn't give me a lot of hope. My dad told me he's hiring the local biker gang to act as security. We live in a small town and the nearest big city is about an hour away, so it would be really expensive to have a security company come out. I don't have a problem with that. This is the type of gang that helps out abused kids and animals, and they do a lot of good where I live. The worst I've heard about them is they doled out some rural justice to a guy that was beating up the sister of one of the members and ran him out of town. When my mom got her DUI, she ran into someone's house and car. When she tried to back out, no one was hurt, thank goodness. And I guess it was the house of a relation of someone in the gang, so they agreed to help, and my dad is paying them to be security just in case. They know my family. One of my dad's cousins is a member, and they know my mom. I think she dated a guy in the gang at one point, and what to look out for. It may be moot if she ends up in rehab. I'm not stressing about her anymore. I have 13 days until my wedding. I'm going to focus on the final touches and just enjoy myself. My biological mom made her choices. Now that I've stood up for myself, I feel nothing but relief. My stepmom will be there and I see her more as my real mom, so it's all fine. I've been through a lot of therapy already, so I've had to make peace with how my actual mother is. I'm officially estranged from my mother. September 24th, 2023, same day. Well, it happened yesterday. I got into a fight with my mother and officially estranged myself from her. It sucks, and I had a gnarly headache when I was done. Her drinking and behavior just proved too much and I had to univite her from my wedding. I feel sad it came to this, but the most powerful feeling I have is relief. Update. My mother thinks she's entitled to alcohol at my wedding. September 30th, 2023. I didn't think I'd be back so soon, but it's my mom's world and we all just live in it. My mother got 911 called on her for domestic violence on Tuesday. She apparently started throwing wine bottles at her boyfriend, who locked himself in the bathroom and called the cops while she destroyed their place in one of her temper tantrums. She wasn't making any sense when the cops got there, so they restrained her and took her to a hospital. She's been stuck in the psychiatric ward ever since. My sister was listed as a contact for her and she got the call about mom on Wednesday. The doctors at the hospital spoke to my sister and they think she may be showing signs of alcohol-related dementia and some sort of psychotic disorder like bipolar disorder. They currently have her in alcohol detox, and from what my sister was told, it's pretty bad. They won't allow her visitors until she's out of detox. Not that anyone really has a desire to visit her anymore. My sister and I decided enough was enough and we petitioned for guardianship for her yesterday at the request of a social worker who interviewed my sister, my uncles, my grandparents, and myself. A guardianship means they can hold her while it winds through the system rather than her being released after 72 hours. My grandmother's upset as she thinks all of the issues should be kept in the family and the state shouldn't step in. My uncles and grandfather are on the side of having a guardianship. As far as they're concerned, she's not welcome in the family anymore and they won't allow her to continue to take advantage of anyone in the family anymore. My sister and I say let her be a professional's problem and let them figure out what to do with her. My brothers don't care and have effectively washed their hands of her years ago, so their stance is whatever keeps her as far away as humanly possible. We can't deal with her anymore, and why should we? With the guardianship petition, I'm working on washing my hands of this situation entirely. I'm sure I'll be interviewed about why a guardianship is necessary, but other than that, I don't plan to have any further contact with my mom unless she apologizes and makes amends for her behavior, if that's something she's even capable of anymore. I just don't see that happening, and any compassion or understanding I had for her in the past is gone. Whatever state her life is in, she brought it on herself. I just want to move on with my life without her in it and be done with her for good. It doesn't look like she'll be released from the hospital anytime soon, so there's no risk of her attending my wedding. I did talk to her boyfriend yesterday after sister and I filed our paperwork, and we decided to invite him to lunch. He's decided to break up with her for good, and we learned just how bad things were with her. He's a real nice guy who's been caught up in a bad situation and had no clue how bad she could be. I feel really bad for him. I did decide to invite him to my wedding, as I can tell he's a lonely dude who's been to hell and back. Not sure he'll show, but the offer is there. There was a time I'd have allowed an event like this to ruin the run-up to the wedding, but I've been able to separate my mom's behavior from the wedding. It hasn't put a damper on it. Now that my mom is squared away, I can enjoy myself. I just put the final touches on the catering order and am expecting the last of my supplies. My aunt wants to put the final touches on my wedding attire. If I haven't mentioned, both my fiance and I are huge steampunk fans, and so we're wearing steampunk attire and encouraging everyone else to dress in steampunk. Not required though. My wedding dress is actually more of a suit situation, but it looks badass. I don't think I'll update again, as I want to put all of this behind me, and I don't plan to have any contact with my mother going forward. I'm looking forward to a bright future with my husband. My mom can stay in the past, and as cold and heartless as it sounds, I'm glad she's not going to be my family's problem anymore. Post-wedding update, October 9th, 2023. I just signed into this account again with a lot of people begging for updates. I don't have a lot. I guess my entire story is now in the best of Reddit. Thanks, I guess. I never knew dealing with my alcoholic mother was worthy of a best post. I just wanted to rant and sanity check myself. Only news on my mother is that she's out of detox and currently in a catatonic state, refusing to speak, eat, or drink water. They may install a feeding tube if she doesn't let up. I think she's trying to be dramatic and get attention. So do my uncles. I could be wrong, but honestly I don't care anymore. We're not sure she has dementia, but she definitely has something going on, but doing any kind of evaluation while she acts like this is difficult. She also has liver disease, needs dialysis, and possibly even a transplant, if she qualifies. The doctors made it very clear that if she doesn't quit drinking, she will die within the next 5 years, and it may even still be too late. I think I'd feel more sad, but I've had to realize that I lost my mother long ago. I did invite my mom's boyfriend, but he chose not to come. He's decided to get help for his own alcohol issues, according to my sister. I wish him the best. As for the wedding, I'm now happily married, and on Wednesday I took a pregnancy test that came back positive. We're super excited, but haven't told anyone in our family yet. The wedding was fantastic, and the day went off without a hitch. We had a blast and are heading out on our honeymoon on Wednesday to Costa Rica. My brothers and stepbrothers very sweetly hazed my husband during the at-home bachelor party and made it clear they're excited to have another brother. My stepmom did all of the mom stuff during the wedding. That was already planned before all of this. No one snuck in alcohol, there weren't any scenes. The worst that happened was my sister crying due to all of the stress she's been under. I do have some sympathy, but most of it is self-inflicted though, because she enables. But all in all, it was a great day and I was surrounded by those I love most. I know a lot of people asked for pics on my wedding suit. I will see if there's some way I can crop identifying stuff from it and post it here once I get my wedding pictures back. Otherwise, I'll figure out a way to post the outfits themselves. That's all I have. I'll try to update after my honeymoon. Now it seems like a baby is coming, so no promises. Am I the A for upsetting my coworker by calling her work sister after she called me work husband during an office happy hour in front of everyone? June 27th, 2024. I, 34 years old, work in a small office with about 30 people. Mary, 35 years old, is one of my coworkers. We have been working together for 6 years now. Our department has 6 people, and we frequently travel across the state for government projects. We always travel in pairs, and although my travel partner changes based on the project, Mary and I are generally assigned to similar projects and enjoy each other's company. My wife also likes Mary. Overall, we have a very healthy work relationship. On to the incident. Yesterday, we had a happy hour at our office, and we were all drinking after work hours and chatting. A group of around 10 people stayed back. Mary was talking about how much we have traveled together in the last year. She was roasting me for my travel habits, like always forgetting stuff in my hotel room and being sweaty and stinky at breakfast because I go to the hotel gym. Everyone was laughing, and she made it sound like I was unbearable to travel with, all in good fun. I also shared some funny and sweet stories about her and agreed that I can be difficult to travel with sometimes. Mary came to me, hugged me tightly, and told me that she loves me and that I am her work husband. Although it was innocent on the surface, she might have been a bit drunk and didn't let go of her tight hug. I also hate that phrase because I have a wife whom I promise to be with forever, not just during non-working hours. After a few seconds, I started feeling uncomfortable and noticed a few people staring at us. To defuse this situation, I gently took her hands off my shoulders and told her she was my work sister and that's why I love to annoy her so much. This upset Mary, and she left, went back to her desk and sobbed silently. I tried to apologize, but she expressed how embarrassing the whole situation was. She said she meant work husband in a platonic way, but calling her work sister made her sound like a creep in front of the office. She was also angry that I removed her hands from my shoulders while hugging. I tried to explain that I disliked the work husband phrase and noticed people giving dirty looks when she said it. I was just trying to ensure people didn't take her words the wrong way. We talked for a few minutes afterward, and Mary calmed down. She hugged me again and left. I felt really guilty afterward because I saw Mary's point. I made her sound like a creep by implying she meant something inappropriate by calling me her work husband. However, I was uncomfortable in that situation and didn't want people to call us that or assume something wrong. Am I the asshole for calling Mary my work sister? I am sitting in my office writing this and worried if I embarrassed Mary in front of everyone. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. You're not the A. All too often, work spouses end up being inappropriately involved and you were trying to head off any rumors. Good on you. I think work sister is a much better term. Commenter 2. You didn't do anything wrong. Not the A. To my mind, she raises a red flag by being so upset about it. It meant more to her than it did to you. You may need to set a boundary of not traveling with her. Commenter 3. Not the A, though you're being far too generous. The reason why she jumped straight to thinking you were calling her a creep, because she knew what she was doing was inappropriate. Work husband is considered widely inappropriate now. She knows this. You responded correctly. You owe your actual wife loyalty. Mary needs to back off and act more of a professional. Commenter 4. Not the A. I think you were justified that whole time. Unfortunately, alcohol can make things awkward for everyone, but you were made uncomfortable by the extended hug, so you removing her arms from you was understandable. The problem right now is that Mary is only considering her own feelings and not thinking at all how her actions made you feel. She did think that such a public display of affection might make a married man uncomfortable. She's only thinking that you made her look like a creep. And let's be honest, she did kind of look like someone hitting on a married man after drinking too much. Commenter 5. Not the A. Work sister is 100% a compliment. Work husband is the stuff that will get a person reported to HR. Mary is waving bright red flags. You might want to get ahead of this now. All your colleagues are suspicious. No more being paired with Mary. Consider telling your wife before one of them does. Commenter 6. The best way to know that you needed to set a limit was her overreacting. Sobbing at her desk. It was time to stop it. If she tries to bring it up again, repeat what you said. She's a great co-worker, but you only have one wife, so you don't do the work-wife jokes. Nothing personal, but it's not for you. If she brings it up a second time, you'll need to email your supervisor to get written documentation. You just describe what happened, as you did above, when and where, and that you'd like them to informally coach her on letting it go. If she brings it up a third time, you'll need to go to HR and ask to be taken off projects involving travel with her. I really hope she can pull it together and that she can join you in cheerfully going back to work. But remember that it's her making this weird, not you, and your first responsibility is to preserve your own employment. Commenter 7. Mary's point only is valid if Mary is humiliated by a sisterly relationship when she was going for more. The I love you, the long emotional hug not letting go, says OP needs to be paired with someone else on work trips for a while. And OP, shower before breakfast in public. Mary is not the only one who can smell your body odor or who has to sit in the chair you were sweating in. No one needs that much visibility into your body smells and fluids. Too much closeness. Editor's note. I looked through the comments and didn't find a single "you're the asshole, everyone sucks here," or "no assholes here." It was universally not the asshole. Update, July 2nd, 2024. I posted this about calling my coworker Mary my work sister after she tried to call me her work husband in front of the entire office. A lot of you are asking for an update, but that sub does not allow me to post an update, so I'm writing it here. Thanks everyone for your comments and giving me confidence that I did not do anything wrong or inappropriate. As I was sitting in the office the next day, I knew things would be a bit awkward between Mary and me. Mary ignored me the whole morning. Initially, I was planning to go and apologize to her, but after the post, I decided that I do not need to do that, as I should be the one who was offended. Everyone in the office could see that we were acting weird, and I heard some people gossiping about us. One of the ladies also came to me and asked me if I wanted to talk about Mary and me. Around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, I was sitting in my office working. Mary came into my office and closed the door behind her. She was angry at me and started saying that I need to stop being an asshole and stop ignoring her. I told her to sit and to talk about what is going on. She told me that she feels humiliated, and everyone has been staring at her the whole morning because of what I did. I also stood my ground and told her that I was okay with her making fun of me, but calling me her work husband and hugging me in front of everyone for a long time made the situation awkward. She told me to get over myself and that I should know exactly what she meant. Mary said that I made a big deal of what was supposed to be a joke and made it awkward for everyone. She said calling someone work husband is a normal thing and just means that she knows me intimately like a spouse would. She said that because we spend so much time traveling together, she knows all the intimate details of how I behave outside work. I stopped her and told her that I felt offended by the term work husband because I have a wife and I do not want people to use that term to describe our relationship. I told her that she would not understand as she is single, but as a married man, I really do not want anyone to describe me as a husband in any capacity. She said that I am again misinterpreting what she was saying. She felt that as we have known each other more times than I have been married, she knows me more intimately than even my wife. I have no idea why she feels that way, and I also behave like her husband when we travel together. She went on about how we go out to dinners together after work, how I always insist on having breakfast together in the morning to plan our actions of the day, and I walk around in my underwear, referring to my gym shorts, around her in the mornings. She also talked about how we spend hours talking to each other during road trips and how I am the only man she can trust with any secret in her life. She said that I am the definition of a work husband, and I am just in denial. I was a bit angry at this point. I told her that I do all that because I consider her my friend and she is delusional if she feels she knows me more intimately than my wife. I told her I do not want to hear that term again and it is extremely disrespectful to my marriage. Only one woman gets to call me her husband and that is my wife. Moreover, if my actions are giving her such ideas, maybe we need to stop being friends. She became apologetic afterwards and told me that she did not mean to disrespect my wife, and it was not her intention. She apologized to me and told me to just let it go. She said that she loves traveling with me and she doesn't want anything to change between us. She again said that I am misinterpreting her statement and just wants to move on. She came to hug me again, but I just told her it was okay and stepped back. I also talked to my wife about the incident that night. As expected, my wife was angry at Mary and told me that she hates the term work husband. She asked me if Mary has ever flirted with me during our trips or has a crush on me. I truthfully told her that I really have not felt that way and she may have just said that because she was a bit drunk and is now being stubborn about it. My wife said that she feels a bit uncomfortable about Mary now and says that it's strike one for Mary and I need to try and put more distance between us while traveling. If she ever repeats the same behavior again, I should report her to HR. I promised my wife that I would try to reduce my interactions with Mary outside work hours and be more guarded around her. Relevant comments. Commenter 8. Mary's description of your relationship sounds really clingy and dependent. She has created a narrative in her head about your connection, that the only man she can trust with any secret in her life. That's not a work husband, whatever that means. You better keep your interactions register in public, this can bite you in the butt very fast. Commenter 9, not the A. I agree you should go to HR so they're aware of the situation. I would also suggest no more business trips with her if possible. The fact that she claims to know you more intimately than your wife is not only delusional and disrespectful, it's concerning. She's only beginning to show her crazy side. Commenter 10, not the A. I also think that if you're married, the terms work husband or wife are very inappropriate. Your wife sounds like a very reasonable person. She's upset but not taking it out on you. You made the right call, and if anything you could even get ahead of the game by going to HR now about the situation. OP, just curious, but what would the HR complaint even be? I feel uncomfortable about the situation, but beyond speculation, I do not see what I can complain about. Commenter 11. Hey HR person, I would like to file something with you just so it's on record. At the moment it feels like things are resolved, but just in case something else happens in the future I just want to cover all bases. Here's what happened. Here's what I did about it. Here's what Mary's response was. Here's where things are at now. I don't want anyone to have another conversation with her at this time because I believe it will escalate things instead of letting things die down. But if she doesn't let things go, I wanted HR to be in the loop. Commenter 12. Not the A. I agree with you, wife. Mary's reaction was so often defensive. Instead of owning it and apologizing, she continued to double down and say that she knew you more intimately. She is quite the presumptuous woman. I 100% believe that this woman has romantic feelings for you, and all these comments about work husband and the ever-lingering hug plus saying she knows you better and more intimately do not speak of someone who has a platonic friendship or professional relationship in mind. I would not travel with her anymore and see if you can put some distance with her and not have to work with her. This woman is going to cause trouble for you. Her reaction was one of possession over you, which comes when someone has amorous feelings. Commenter 13. Okay, never, and I do mean never, be in a room alone with this woman ever again. Cause when you go to HR, and you definitely should, in retaliation she could spin any number of accusations against you now. Even if you don't think she is capable of that kind of behavior, you're having trouble right now because she is acting in a manner you would not have expected from her. Not the A commenter 14. Hopefully you don't have to travel with her, but if they can't change it and you are stuck with Mary, then from here on out no more eating breakfast with her. No more grading meals together. Spend that time FaceTiming your wife, have a breakfast, lunch, dinner date over FaceTime. Let Mary eat alone. Or you take your meals in your room. No more walking around in your gym clothes around Mary. She has already twisted it by saying it was your underwear. If you need to speak to her about anything that has to do with work, simply text her. There's no need to have breakfast with her to talk it over, since she already got the wrong impression of you. Keep it through text, no phone calls, just text her. You have your meals separate and have your rooms on the opposite side if need be. Don't ask her to hang out during downtime while traveling. Let her do her and you keep to yourself. Hopefully your work will gladly change you both. Update, edited in post, 8 hours later. Thanks everyone for the comments and explaining the urgency of the situation. I discussed it with my wife and have set up meetings with my manager and HR today. I plan to not file a complaint, but document what happened last week and why it made me uncomfortable. I do not have any upcoming travels this week due to holidays, but have to travel next Tuesday with her to a worksite. I will discuss with my manager what my options are. However, I feel a little distance between Mary and me for some time would be the right solution for now. Editor's note, OP has reported the situation to HR, but he is traveling today according to the above update with her, and there could be further issues, so I am marking this as ongoing. Am I the A for insisting my son call his grandmother Mrs. Smith instead of Grandma because she refuses to accept me as family? Original post, September 3, 2020. My relationship with my mother-in-law, Mrs. Smith, is crap. She's cold to me because I kept my last name, Miller. She says I'll treat her like family when she wants to be part of it. She calls me Jake's friend. My husband Jake loves me all the same. He doesn't bother standing up to her because it's a way for her to start a fight. We rarely talk to her. She makes no effort. Neither do we. Jake and I had discussed whose last name our kid would have prior to the birth. He initiated the conversation. I'd left the decision up to him. After the birth, the families visited the hospital. Jake asked what our son's last name was going to be. I told him it was still his choice. He smiled and said, "Little baby Miller, I like it." He filled out the paperwork. Mother-in-law looked livid. She started asking questions, but my dad started crying. Both of my brothers have died. Dad has never mentioned it, but I know passing the last name down makes him happy. Neither Jake nor I anticipated this, nor did it for this reason, but it was sweet all the same. After she left, mother-in-law let people know what I had done and how now she wouldn't feel like a grandmother. A month later, a sister-in-law announced her pregnancy. Mother-in-law said, "Finally, I'll feel like a grandmother." Again, my husband didn't say anything, neither did I. Our son started talking. During a video call, where my mother-in-law did nothing but gush about sister-in-law's daughter, who is adorable, Jake was trying to get the baby to talk. Son lost interest. I took son, and Jake let mother-in-law ramble some more before ending the call. Mother-in-law said she wanted to say bye to son. Jake turned the phone. Mother-in-law said, "Say bye to Grandma, make son say it, I'm Grandma now." I snapped inside, so I said, "Say bye, Mrs. Smith." My mother-in-law's face dropped. Jake turned the camera away and said bye quickly. He laughed, said I was awesome, but we better put our phones on silent. The only call to text I responded to was the other sister-in-law, who said I didn't need to go out of my way to be nasty. That mother-in-law went around saying how excited she was about son, lie. That her initial comments were understandable because I talked Jake out of tradition, I did not, and that I'd hurt mother-in-law. Mother-in-law needed time to adjust. I said thank you for your input. Mother-in-law texted eventually saying I'd really upset her. I said here I was trying to respect the importance you feel to last names. You've said multiple times I'm not family because of my last name. You made it more than clear that's the reason my child doesn't make you feel like a grandma. Now you'll be known as Mrs. Smith. She said sorry. She didn't mean it that way, but that my dad's reaction was an example of how important last names are. I now had to forgive her because of my family. It made me angrier that she brought my dad into this, and I can't tell if I'm being the asshole or not. Edit. Thank you again to everyone who gave awards. It was very kind of you and I do appreciate it. Jake is home and I had him read the post. Some of you really cracked him up. Some made good points which we have discussed. Apparently, he also got a text from his sister and asked how much money she got from mother-in-law for telling me off. He also made sure to tell sister-in-law who had the baby that we hold nothing against her, should mother-in-law try to spin it that way. She knows mother-in-law better. Jake would also like to tell those who are telling me I should take his name that he disagrees and he's not about the sexism you're spewing. Though he does now want to send mother-in-law a Christmas card from the Millers. Edit 2. You guys are being great. I woke up to many more responses than I anticipated. Thank you. Just to clarify, my son will not be calling mother-in-law Mrs. Smith. They barely have a relationship as he's still a baby and mother-in-law makes no effort. After some discussion, Jake is going to take time to figure out what he wants from mother-in-law and if he thinks that's possible. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Can I just say your marriage sounds great? The way you wanted the baby's last name to be his choice and he chose yours. There's so much love and respect here. Also, I like how he stands by your side in his mother's nonsense. You both are awesome. Not the AOP, I just assumed our son would have his. He brought it up. He said it was fair since I was doing all the work. He said if he pushed a human out of him he'd want to put his name on it. Which makes me laugh. I still let it be his choice because regardless of his name, I'm gonna love this kid. If we have a second, I may insist they get his last name. Seems fair. I am a very lucky woman, but it should be noted he wears his gross shoes through the house, so not perfect. But he says I sleep like an MMA fighter, so I suppose we're even. OP responds to a comment that answers many points. Here. I don't see a reason why you were angry when she told you about your father's reaction. Seems a pretty valid point, the importance that the last name has for your father and her. This observation doesn't excuse her actions, but still a good point. I mean, for what you have said seems like your dad would have made some nasty comments, but his crying shows how important it is for some people. Mother-in-law divorced the man whose last name she took. It wasn't even her original name. And she has another son who is going to have kids. My husband wasn't her only option. And my father lost 2 sons. My dad's reaction comes from a very different emotional place. And frankly, he knew he wasn't entitled to it. He simply appreciates it. Even father-in-law didn't care. And again, this decision was made by my husband, with my full support. Why isn't she mad at him? I'm not sure if this is how you should say it, taste of her own medicine. It was a good move to show her how unrespectful she was doing the same, and calling her by her last name was a good move indeed. But now that she is taking accountability, I think that's the word, it would be a jerk move to keep calling her in that way. Maybe you can use this to put boundaries to her actions, so it would be smart to get an agreement instead of keeping the last name war. I'm not going to keep calling her that. I'm currently discussing with my husband what we should do. Verdict, not the asshole. Update October 23rd, 2020. Jake and I appreciated all the support. Though Jake wants the direct messengers to know that he's okay with me taking his balls because he loses everything anyway. This brought him a good chuckle before the serious talk. We both also want to be very clear that taking his name was never on the table, nor does he care. I also want to say I know how great Jake is. Though since the post he's been demanding, I thank the world's best husband anytime he does something for me. His humor is my favorite part of him. Because it's his mom, I let him decide how to handle it. We both agreed that our son would obviously know mother-in-law as his grandma, but he wouldn't have a relationship with her unless she addressed the blatant favoritism. That conversation did not go well. She denied having favorites, lied about pretty much everything, then told me the compromise she was willing to make was that if she had to accept me for who I am, being that I kept that name, I'd have to accept her for who she is. I didn't respond before Jake ripped into her about how she didn't get to make demands. That she was critical of me, assumed things that he already told her weren't true. That this conversation was happening because we didn't accept who she was. He said if he ever heard her make another comment about the Miller last name, he'd take it. She started crying about losing her family and he hung up. One sister-in-law, who is mother-in-law's favorite child, sent me a nasty message including the line, "I wonder if your dead brother would be happy if you used him to break mother-in-law's heart." I sent the screenshot to mother-in-law and said, "Call off your dog or I'll take her to the pound." I have sent a screenshot of that to anyone who has tried to question me. If they tried to defend mother-in-law or sister-in-law, I blocked them. Word got around quickly about this, and now sister-in-law is all but cut out of father-in-law's side of the family. Even father-in-law has come down on her hard. Sister-in-law is desperately trying to apologize and fix this. She even allowed Jake to read everything mother-in-law sent to her about my last name. I tried to read some of it but stopped. I don't want to be angry. I'm taking time to decide how to handle this. I am happy to be done with mother-in-law. She never really bothered me. It does take a lot to get to me. But I don't want her behavior and attitudes being normalized with my son. I wasn't prepared for motherhood to have such a strong effect. Jake did admit he gave son my last name for my dad. Years ago my dad asked if Jake was gonna propose to me. Jake said if my dad wanted to know he would give him a heads up, but he wouldn't ask for his blessing or permission. In many more words, Dad said he never had any expectations of that. He didn't worry about gender roles, though he was glad he would gain a son again. Jake didn't feel obligated. He just wanted to do that for my dad. Sincerely, thank you all. Edit. Hey everyone, I did not expect to wake up to the amount of messages I did. I appreciate them all. Jake takes both the compliments and the insults. As do I. I also want to clear up some questions. Yes, this is real, but I'm not going to prove that. Mother-in-law took father-in-law's name. They are divorced. They have 2 daughters and 2 sons. Brother-in-law intends to have children and will pass on the Smith name. Sister-in-law has a daughter who has sister-in-law's husband's name. Sister-in-law also took his name. The youngest sister-in-law is the one who sent the text. I'm not going to apologize for how I spoke to mother-in-law after she encouraged her daughter to use my brother like that. There's text proof that mother-in-law did this. Sister-in-law showed Jake. I have no intentions on seeking therapy or a relationship with either of them, and that's the most that can be asked of me in this upset state. If when we have a second child, I always intended for them to get Jake's last name. Jake knows and is cool with it. Jake is willing to be called by my last name, but I doubt he'll actually change it. Neither of us is willing to do paperwork out of spite either. Yes, I still cry remembering my dad crying about this. I always assumed Jake did this for this reason. He really is a great man. Relevant comments. Commenter 2. You've got yourself a great husband. Not a lot of people could stand their ground like he did. Good luck to both of you and your little son OP. He's always been able to stand up for himself. I won't say it didn't get to him, especially what his sister did, but he just runs it out. He may also make himself a world's best husband t-shirt if he sees more compliments. But he does deserve it. And thank you. Commenter 3. Would he consider changing his name to Miller, or would that just pour more gasoline on the fire? OP. Yes, he would, but he tries not to let anger make his decisions. I also don't think he would because of the paperwork required, and he does everything he can to avoid it, including bribing me to do it. Commenter 4. That line? Call your dog off or I'll take her to the pound so bloody good. OP. I didn't mean it violently either. Just keep your yapping dog in your yard or I'll make it someone else's problem. Sister-in-law is still yapping, just more whiny now. I don't think she realized her family would draw a line in the sand. The majority aren't necessarily taking our side, but it's clear they're staying out of it because defending her isn't really an option. Commenter 5. I'm glad OP and her husband feel at peace, but Jesus fucking Christ, they need to go NC with the mother-in-law before she can damage their child with her favoritism of the other grandchild and her general unhinged pettiness. Commenter 6. 100% unless mother-in-law's behavior takes a complete 180, OP's kid will notice the favoritism and it will hurt. I can say from experience, my dad's sister was the favorite child, and by extension, her kid ended up being the favorite grandchild, and my nana wasn't shy about it. My other grandmother actually took her aside at one point and told her that I wasn't stupid and eventually I'd be old enough to notice the blatant favoritism and choose how I wanted to deal with it. Sure enough, I got to age 16 and sent my nana my prom photos on Messenger. She ignored them completely, not even a "you looked great" message, while at the same time posting my cousin's prom photos all over Facebook talking about how beautiful she was. I blocked her and I haven't bothered speaking to her in the 8 years since. It was the straw that broke the camel's back after a decade and a half of my cousin getting better presents, dictating all our outings, getting her way with tantrums, and being automatically believed when she would get me in trouble for things she did. Commenter 7. Same thing with my grandmother. She treated my dad's sister's children so much better than us. She was awful to us growing up while treating them like princesses. It's funny now how much she has changed her ways now that we are all grown and she finally realized that my cousins are shit. It's a bit too late now. She needed to treat us better as children, not pretend all is well now that we are all in our late 40s and 50s.